Alright guys, welcome back for another video on HAIKYU Fly High, and today I'm going to do a build guide for SP Kenma, and I will also briefly talk about his team building towards the end of the video. Now, I have already went through all of his skills in separate videos, so I'm not going to repeat myself here. If you're interested, then do check out that video on my channel. But what I would kind of want to reiterate again is the importance of one particular stat for Kenma, and that is going to be reflex stats, okay? So not only because he is kind of like his whole characteristic is the fact that he is a very good reflex buffer for the whole team, but also reflex on himself is also very important because it essentially can be used in 3 different ways. Okay, so when we are talking about potential build, if you're actually able to build reflex, you know that this can basically help you in 3 different ways, which is amazing. Okay, so in which 3 ways can it help you? First of all, is the reflex stats by itself, right? Second thing is that for his skill 3, depending on what level it is, but basically your awareness will increase by an X percentage of your reflex. Okay, so obviously the higher reflex, that basically means the higher crit when you actually do a set or set it down. And then furthermore, if you actually have him as skill resonance 2, when he does a set or set it down, the next person to perform that attack is actually going to get a crit damage equivalent to reflex as well. Okay, so essentially reflex literally help him to give an extra crit damage buff to a teammate. It's also the reflex on himself and also improve his awareness, so basically his crit rate when he do a set or set down. Okay, so that's kind of why reflex is going to be so important on him. With that in mind, let's talk about his potential build. Okay, so potential build, obviously you have 6 slots. 2 slots are going to be mandatory. It's going to be this 2 set for forceful car because it's able to increase your reflex by an extra 7.5%. Okay, this is super important. Okay, so make sure you definitely have a 2 set on this. Now, as for the other 4 remaining slots, there are 2 ways of going around it. Now, if we actually check the in-game recommendation, it's kind of gonna give you a direction you want to build, but you don't want to follow it exactly, okay? So the first approach, you can go for set dump. This is actually correct, okay? So the game recommendation is correct. Set dump is good because obviously his ultimate attack is actually a set dump. So if you're actually planning to use his set dump a lot, obviously this would actually increase his strength by extra 30% when you do that. There's also going to be a permanent buff of awareness by 10%, which can also be quite helpful depending on what level is your skill 3 on your Kenma. I'll talk about the awareness substats in a bit in terms of like when do you actually want to raise it even further. But that obviously is quite useful, assuming you will actually do set it down. However, for some players, for example, for me personally, I don't really like to play set it up too much. Like for me, it's more like a way to stall the game for one extra rally rather than a way for me actually trying to actively looking to win the point. So vast majority of the time, I wouldn't actually be using my set it up, and as a result, I don't actually value this as much. So I would then go down building it the other approach, in which case the game is going to recommend to you this 4-piece precise set. However, this is not actually the right way of building it, okay? So be careful up here. The reason for this is if we actually take a look at 4 set effect, this is increasing the setting power by 15% of the set stat. Now, whilst that looks nice on a first look, remember, Kenma does have actually both setter dump and also setting ability, okay? So whilst I say vast majority of the time I wouldn't use setter dump, maybe in one match I might still use it once or twice. Okay, it's just not something I would regularly use. However, if I actually use this full set effect for precise set, I wouldn't actually improve the power of my setter down because this is not actually improving the raw stat of set. Okay, so rather than going for full set precise set, what I would typically actually recommend you guys to do is actually just mix and match of 2 other setter potential. Okay, so for example, for me personally, I'm using 2 sets for precise serve, which can give me another extra 15% set stat, and also I'm using another 2 set for the set it up, which also give me an extra 15%. Okay, so to me, this increase of the raw stats by an extra 15% is going to be more valuable than, let's say, increasing the power of my setting skill, but not actually improving the power of my set it up. Okay, so that's just something for you guys to bear in mind. But other approaches going to be fine. It's going more down to your personal preference of how much you value the setup, and also, to be honest, to some extent, I would also even place the substats over preference to this, okay? Because, for example, I could have even went for a 4 set setter dump. However, what I realized when I was going through my bag, as I realized, oh, I have a really good slot 3, which can actually give me a 4.8% reflect. I know the other stats, substats are not ideal, but still, 4.8% reflect. And then I was looking around and then I saw this slot 5, and this one can give me 6.4% increase in reflex. So I said, okay, you know what, I'm just going to use a precise serve, okay? Because the reflex I can get here, this is already more than 10%, and that's going to be a lot more valuable to me than actually some of the full set effect, okay? So I'm, to be honest, a bit more indifferent in terms of which route you want to go down in terms of potential set. The thing I would probably actually recommend you guys to do first is actually just go through your back and see which ones of your potential actually have that reflex substat, okay? And reflex are going to be super important. You should aim to try to get your reflex to about 40%, so that in the match itself you can get as high as to 80 or 90% on Kenma's reflex, okay? Obviously it's going to be sealed off at 100%, but you should try to go as close to that as possible. And just to give you an example to show you this is definitely possible. So if you if you see my set, so this is basically all the stats buff I have. So I got 37.6 just from my potential substats and main stat. This is not even counting the two set effect, okay? If I actually want to see the overall two set effect, what I can then show you here is if I go to my stats, you can see my total reflex here is 45.1. Okay, so that's how much I get from potential, but this is not counting memory. So if we actually calculate how much reflex my Kenma can actually achieve in a match, what you see here is I already get 50% here. Okay, then my memory can give me another 8%. Okay, so that's already 58%. Then if I actually take a look at Kenma's own skills, this can give me a passive 13% because this is I have it at level 2, so that together is already 71% increase in reflex. And then because I also play him with SP Hunter, I can get 15 stacks of this. Each stack is going to be 1.5%, so that's another 22.5% extra. So actually my Kenma can get up to 93.5% reflex in a match, which is absolutely crazy, okay? And that should be something you're aiming for, okay? You should try to aim for as close to 100% as possible. And that's kind of why it's going to be a main deciding factor for your potential. Now, in terms of the actual substats that you want to look for, basically, like I said, reflex are going to be the main one you want. So look for that in all of your substats. It's going to be higher priority than anything else, okay? I will almost say it's higher priority than anything else combined. So that's going to be the number one thing you look for. In terms of the main stats, slot 2, slot 4, and also slot 6. Slot 4 is obviously going to be reflex, that's self-explanatory. Slot 2, you want to go for either set or awareness, and the determining factor for this is going to be how much is your skill 3 leveled up, okay? Because if your skill 3 is only at level 1, you're only going to increase awareness by 40% of reflex stat, okay? So for example, let's say if your reflex normally is only 80%, 40% of that 80% is only going to be 32%. That's not actually very consistent. So if your skill level for your passive is only going to be level 1, I'll probably still recommend awareness as the main stat on slot 2. However, if it's actually level 2 or higher, for example, for me, right, I have at level 2, I just showed you I can get 90% reflex from normally. So 60% of 90%, that's already 54%. There's also a bond with SP Hinata, which can further increase it by 18%, okay? So if I go into here, if I just show you the bond, this can also increase awareness by 1.2 for each stack and 15 stack. Okay, so that's another 18% here. So for me personally, I can already get my awareness up to about 70% without even doing anything. So that's kind of why personally I decided I don't actually need any more awareness. So that's kind of why I went for the set as my main stat. But for you guys, depending on what skill levels you reflect, you may actually choose to go for awareness straight up here. Okay, and then in terms of slot 6, up to you. It's normally either going to be set or attack technique. Okay, either one of them is going to be fine. Defense technique is not actually that useful for Kenma, even though he's a receiver. He's a receive typing setter. He doesn't actually have any receiving skills. Okay, so you wouldn't actually be expecting him to do much there. Now between attack technique and also the set stat, because Kenma only have set and set down, which both use a set stat, so that's kind of what set can also be a good alternative to attack technique. Obviously, attack technique is a different multiplier, so it may end up to be better, but to me, there isn't like a massive difference between the two. Okay, so once again, go for the one with a high reflex, and that's kind of why I made my decision here. Okay, I'm choosing this one with the set main stat purely because of the fact the substat is a reflex 4.8, and I'm literally ignoring all of the other substats here. Okay, I'm just literally trying to get my reflex as high as possible overall. Okay, so that's gonna be the build guide for SP Kenma. In terms of memory, obviously the best one's gonna be the one for himself. Otherwise, just use one of the universal SATA memory, like the one for Akashi or the one for Concurrent Gawa. Okay. Now, team building, to be honest, there isn't too much to talk about team building in terms of SP Kenma, because he's normally just bundled up with SP Hinata. So if you actually want to know the team building, then just check out my previous video on how to play SP Hinata, because a lot of the logic or the methodology team building tips are also going to apply here. The only thing I'm going to call out in this video, however, is that I know some people are saying, for example, SP Kenma is just for a receiving team, which to be honest, that's also the team I'm building, because it's actually potentially somewhat hard to fit him into a different team and still have that high team power, okay? And that's kind of what a lot of people are saying. Receive specialty is going to be countered a lot in the PvP meta right now, because PvP meta is still power dominated. I would say yes and no to that, okay? Yes, it is going to be countered by power specialty, but one thing you have to remember is that right now we only have 2 SP characters, okay? None of the power characters are actually SP characters. So what that basically means, assuming everyone's dupe level are similar, if you actually play SP Kenma, you are actually going to have a higher power rating than any other power specialty teams out there, okay? And if you think that power rating is less important than countering specialty, then that's fine. You can actually also go block specialty with SP Kenma, okay? All you should do is just make sure your 4 other characters are all of block specialty, and then you can also have a block specialty which counters the enemy. Obviously, this is going to be at expense of the fact that your team rating is going to be lower, okay? So you can see here, for example, if I actually switch my main team, I am at 186k. If I actually do a block specialty, this drops down to 172k, although my Suki is only at it's not completely high max up skill level, and it's only 5-star level 70, okay? So potentially I can probably get this to 175k. But what I'm trying to say here is that depending on which one you actually value more out of speciality and also your team rating, if you feel like speciality is going to be more important, then simply just switch to block specialty so that you can counter over the power teams, okay? Or if you actually feel like the team rating is going to be more important, then just play this team as is, okay? Sure, you're going to be countered by other people's power teams, but you already made that decision saying that team rating is better than speciality, okay? You just can't have it both ways, okay? You can't have both a good speciality and also a high team rating at the same time. But SP Kenma definitely isn't going to harm your team, okay? At worst, it's just going to be a neutral, and you have to make that decision on whether or not you want to go receive with high team rating or whether you want to go block with low team rating, okay? It's the decision is still going to be up to you on which one you actually prefer more, okay? So I definitely don't think, the fact that Kenma is a receive setter is actually a harmful thing for your team. It's just going to be which one you actually value more and how do you actually want to position yourself in terms of your speciality counter versus team rating difference, okay?